Hello, folks. Hello, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I'm your host, Connor Rebush. With me, as always, is Phil McKenzie. Now that I know was just a guttural vowel sound. Yeah, Phil's now going to tell me that was actually him saying salutations. We just got the of the U.
Not quite.
Phil, how you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. We've got a lot of stuff going on in the MMA world.
We do.
Not all of it sort of... Oh, and the combat sports world, for that matter. Not all of it, like, UFC-centric, but that's no bad deal.
No, I mean, last week we diverted ourselves from the UFC. I'm glad we did, because while we're not going to talk about them on this main episode, both Cannonier Vettori and Sarukian Silva, that is the guy's name, right? Joaquim Silva. I had to figure out in my head if it was Silva or Santos. Neither of those, I think, were particularly interesting to us to talk about in advance. They both delivered on the night, and so there's a lot more to talk about now that we've actually seen them play out. We are definitely going to be covering those on a bonus episode that you can find on our Patreon. Should probably go up concurrent with this, if not a little sooner. We also had, last week we previewed Patricio Pitbull's attempt to wrest the Bellator bantamweight title from the waist of Sergio Pettis. And we got that one completely wrong in the best way possible, because it means there is an awful lot to talk about and a lot of praise for us to heap on Sergio Pettis. We are going to cover that one on this main episode in segment 3. And then ahead of us, we have a decent UFC Fight Night card. And when I say decent, what I mean is that there are enough really interesting fights for us to talk about here, and in a lot of mediocre fights, and then an equal amount of absolute chaff that we have no reason to cover, and therefore we will not. So yeah, enough variety, both one promotion to the next, and in the types of fights that we have to discuss. So just to recap before we jump in, we're going to talk about Ilia Topuria versus Josh Emmett. That is the upcoming Fight Night main event for the UFC. We also have Amanda Ribas versus Macy Barber, which we are going to talk about. That's the co-main event. Pretty interesting matchup there. And then I think in segment 3, we are going to revisit our preview breakdown, our absolutely inaccurate preview breakdown of Pettis versus Pitbull. And I think there is a lot of stuff to talk about. Some people thought it was boring. I thought it was a masterclass. Maybe not a fight that I will revisit and be entertained by forever and ever. But again, there is a lot to talk about, and I think Phil and I were both equally impressed with Sergio Pettis' title defense performance. So, Josh Emmett.
Just like, pretty well.
Yeah, what were you saying?
I think we were talking over each other. No worries.
Yeah, talk under me, Phil, all right? I think we've made this pretty clear.
Yes, sir.
All right, Josh Emmett, Ilia Topuria. Very exciting fight. Not a super easy one to wrap our heads around, because one of our most reliable tools, Phil, is the tool of comparison. Right? We try to frame fighters in terms of like archetypal styles, and we'll look at previous matchups and be like, okay, who have they fought? Who looks like this person? That often makes it much easier to understand how a matchup is going to go down. And there are, I think, a few useful parallels on Josh Emmett's side. People that he has fought that raise some of the same issues as Ilia Topuria. But for Topuria, there isn't really a Josh Emmett or anyone really all that much like him on that UFC resume. He's fought a lot of grapplers, and then the one big power puncher he fought was a big power puncher, Jai Herbert, who's like 9 feet tall and has a very different style from Josh Emmett, shall we say. So that's really the best parallel we have to understand how Topuria might approach Emmett. I will say the saving grace there, this makes it, it's still a little confusing to figure out how his style will work, But it's not difficult to ascertain what style Ilia Topuria will employ. Because both against Jai Herbert and all the others, he's a berserker. He pretty much wants to fight one way against everybody. There are a couple little side paths that fight might travel down. Namely the grappling is often an element that either does or doesn't appear in the fight. But he wants to get in people's faces. He wants to pressure. He wants to hit them first, make them panic and throw back. He wants to slip and come back. And he wants to rip their ribs out of their chests one by one. And, so that at least makes it a little easier to kind of figure out what Josh Emmett will be up against.
Yeah, I think this is one of those ones where you can really see what the fight's going to look like, and it's much harder to just figure out who is going to win it.
Yeah.
Because we're essentially talking two-handed, mostly headhunting power punchers.
I think the mostly headhunting. Yeah, I think the mostly headhunting part certainly applies to Emmett more than Topuria. Topuria is a pretty consistent body puncher.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I trust him to do it more against a fighter like Emmett. That's what I'm gonna.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean,
given that, Topuria tends to go to the body when he's backed people up, and I think possibly when he feels like he has a physical edge over them.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be one of those matchups where both guys are going to be just sort of coiled out at range, and then one of them is going to leap at the other one, and then there's going to be a big flurry of punches, and then they're going to go back to range again. I'm not sure if there's going to be much in the way of I'm not sure if I see Topuria's bodywork being a big factor.
I mean, I think maybe the thing is Emmett is definitely the best athlete that Topuria will have faced so far. He's very strong. He's very powerful. He's very fast. And he is also, unlike Jai Herbert, squat. He's a little tank of a guy compared to the only other power puncher Topuria has faced. I will disagree there. I will be a little surprised if Topuria does not try to constantly harass and pressure, and break the will of Josh Emmett. I haven't seen him fight any other way. I mean, it's more likely that he gets himself into trouble in fights being too aggressive than it is that he lets minutes slip by without trying to put a stamp on the round or outright finish his opponent. I think if we do see the kind of fight you're describing, that's good for Josh Emmett. Because that's basically parity. That puts him in a situation like in the Dan Ige fight, where very likely he maybe just scrapes by on landing the bigger, cleaner shots. But I'm not expecting a simmer here. I am expecting Topuria to fairly early on start getting in Josh Emmett's grill. And I suppose the question is, will the counters of Josh Emmett dissuade him from that? But if the Herbert fight's anything to go by, I would say the answer is no. I think Topuria is a kill or be killed kind of fighter.
Uh-huh.
And I think when he gets hit, he gets mad and wants revenge as quickly as possible. So yeah, I think I'm fairly confident in how, this is obviously no proof that I'm right. How many times have I been fairly confident in the past? Don't look it up. I'm fairly confident that Topuria is gonna try to maul Josh Emmett. And I mentioned the parallels on Josh Emmett's record. There are a couple that are sort of comparable. A couple other pressure fighters and power punchers that he's faced. Notably, the incredible win over Shane Burgos. Not that it's all that incredible at this point that someone has beaten Shane Burgos, but the way Josh Emmett did it, I think still stands head and shoulders above every other performance of his career, as his best, most consistent showing. And then we have other fights like, for example, Jeremy Stevens, a mauling power puncher brawler, not totally unlike Topuria, who sort of yeah, the difference I see between those two guys is that Jeremy Stephens, very much like Topuria, I think, sort of, if not welcomed the exchanges, then only saw one way out of them, which was to extend them and try to have the last word and to punch with Josh Emmett. And Emmett didn't like it. He got badly hurt. I mean, it's not like he didn't respond well. He's in there to duke it out with anybody. He trusts in his power. But here we kind of have two guys whose defense can fall to the wayside a bit once they actually get into an extended punching sequence. And that's true for Jeremy Stephens as well. Stephens happened to win out that time. Shane Burgos, on the other hand, also a pressure fighter, a reasonably hard hitter. I don't think he's not on like the Josh Emmett, Calvin Kattar, Jeremy Stephens, or the Topuria tier as just an explosive shotgun puncher. But Shane Burgos' pressure is sort of a constant simmer in every fight. And how Emmett beat Burgos, as I see it, was sort of by keeping him on the edge of allowing that simmer to boil over, keeping him on the edge of range. It wasn't so much a counter-punching performance from Emmett as it was an intercepting and interrupting performance. And this is a problem that Shane Burgos has encountered in other fights as well. That it's I mean, for example, his fight against Calvin Kattar. That it is possible to touch Burgos first, to get a sort of planted feet sequence of like head movement out of him, and then to adjust your own position while he's sort of still reacting to and trying to find a way to counter the shot that you stung him with. And so it's possible to constantly stick him, interrupt his attack, and then reset, and Burgos will have to reset. He has to sort of inch his way into position before he becomes really effective. He is essentially one of many mid-range, pocket, even close-range fighters in MMA who doesn't really have the range tools to get to that good range consistently. And that's what Emmett did. He just stuck him, interrupted him, same time counters as far as counters went, and then a couple side steps, made Burgos reset. And was able to basically reset and have the same exchange over and over again. And then there's guys like Jeremy Stephens and I think Ilia Topuria who do not like not getting to have the last word. And when hit, we'll try to keep trading and we'll try to push forward and stack layers of offense on. Much harder, I think, to interrupt. I think with Topuria, to interrupt his attacks, you have to do what Jai Herbert did. You have to kick him in the fucking dome. You have to stop him in his tracks. You can't just buzz him and then get a moment to breathe and think. And it's that kind of relentless pressure, I think, that I sort of suspect will lead to Emmett crumbling at some point. I mean, Yair Rodriguez did this to him as well, right? A very different style.
Yeah.
But Yair...
that was a rather predictable, it was a fairly predictable outcome in that you were just like, Josh Emmett is going to try and stay on the outside and blitz in on this guy.
Yeah.
And it was just like, no, you can't do that to him. This is as, this is as absolutely suicidal as like Dan Hooker trying to outbox Edson Barboza from the outside.
Absolutely. Yair just wasn't having it. And if you have the chin to pull it off, then I think a certain amount of, in fact, more than a certain amount, an excess of recklessness can be a very good strategic decision against Josh Emmett. Simply to not give a fuck about the prospect of getting hit, to try to give it back every time or even get in there first and keep piling on. Emmett is, I think he is inconsistent in his performances in part because his power is an out. It is a safety valve that slows people down, and I think he wants to have slower fights. And the Shane Burgos fight remains impressive in light of that, but again, it was like just on the edge of being more than Josh Emmett could handle the entire time. That fight was a very hot simmer all the way through, but at no point was Shane Burgos able to ramp up the intensity and take Josh Emmett out of that comfortable range, out of the comfortable length of exchanges he was wanting to have before resetting. And yeah, again, as recently as the Yair fight, Emmett imploded. Basically, he gassed very quickly against somebody who just refused to let him reset and simply did not respect his power as he is used to people doing.
I think just the main thing about the Rodriguez fight was just the way that Rodriguez could just pour in offense from a range, which...
Yeah, that was part of it too.
Emmett couldn't. I just don't think... I don't think Topuria can insulate himself in that way.
No, I'm with you there. Yeah, he is going to have to be in Emmett's range to deliver the same kind of pressure. But I think he can deliver the same kind of pressure. He will also, I expect, deliver a similar proportion of body work, which was another big factor in the Rodriguez matchup, that Rodriguez just ripped the hell out of Josh Emmett's torso. And that also had an effect on, played a role in how quickly he declined. So yeah, I think I favor Topuria here for the pressure and the consistency and the rage in his style.
Yeah, that's what keeps me. The rage is in some ways what really concerns me. Because, the problem is obviously that, Topuria's never fought anyone like Emmett at all. And Emmett has fought lots of people like Topuria in one way, shape, or form. With various dials turned up and down. Shane Burgos is the slowest. I guess Dan Ige is the fastest.
But lower output. Cater.
Yeah.
A bit. Again, Stevens.
Yeah, Stevens slower than Burgos, Cater faster than Stevens, this kind of stuff. They're all on the same approximate. And the thing I find myself wondering about Topuria is that, has he ever had to be disciplined in a fight?
No.
It's the fact that, when he gets mad, he will chase people down throwing giant winging punches.
Yeah.
And... Emmett is quite a good counterpuncher, and a very powerful one. And I'm just not sure how, Topuria, how much of Topuria's, aggression is built around the idea that he doesn't have to be cautious about what he's doing, because he's just going to crush everyone. Emmett is obviously a monster puncher who has knocked down pretty much everyone he's fought, apart from was it Kate? Did he not knock down Cater? He knocked down Ige almost immediately.
I don't think he knocked down Cater. That one was quite close. In fact, a lot of people thought Cater won.
Yeah, I think we both kind of thought Cater won it, but
yeah,
he
stunned
down Ige almost instantaneously.
Yeah.
I just find myself, I like Topuria more as a striker. Obviously, it's Josh Emmett. I'm not the biggest fan of his striking style
The fighting Fulmer, your old nemesis.
Yeah, Topuria can, as you said, he can jab, he can feint, he tries to work his way inside. Also just, like you said, he just gets mad. He just comes after people on the assumption that they are going to be cowed. The thing about Emmett is that he has been, he hasn't done the greatest in his lineup with those 4 power punches, because he beat Burgos. Okay, let's just say none of those fights was easy for him at all.
No.
Every single fight was competitive, tough, violent, and so on and so forth.
Stressful, visibly stressful.
Yeah. But he also hung tough in all of them.
Yes.
Every power punching boxer guy he fought, the Ige and Cater ones are debatable wins. The Burgos one is a fairly clear win, and Stevens knocked him out. The one thing is that he can hang in this kind of fight.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure that Topuria is willing to recognize what a big threat someone like Emmett actually is.
Yeah, but I mean, I totally see what you're saying. That could easily be the thing that leads to Topuria losing. But I think it can also be a strength. Like, again, like, do you respect Emmett's power, or not? And if you don't, yeah, you might just walk into a shot. You might also terrify him and just be willing to accept a level of risk that he is used to being a barrier for his opponents. This is why I think the Stevens one's the best parallel. Stevens is not as technical a boxer as Ilia Topuria, although Topuria at times is at least as bad a technician as Jeremy Stevens when he's just overthrowing. You know, you see a little bit of both sides of Topuria in all of his fights, where he just gets crazy reckless. But it is the fact that I think when Topuria is invited to a brawl, he's excited to have it. You know, like, he might get mad, but I don't think it's ever because he's shaken. I don't think he was shaken up by Jai Herbert, for example. And he ducked into a head kick like a minute into that fight, and had to spend a while recovering. But I think he was excited at the prospect of a violent fight. And that is kind of how Jeremy Stevens is. Like, Jeremy Stevens is another guy that you can kind of box out of the exchanges, but as long as you're having nonstop exchanges with him, he's going to be in there trying to take your head off. And he took Emmett's head off. Broke his orbital or something, or his jaw, as I recall.
Yeah, it was his orbital. It was the elbow that he landed on him after he knocked him down.
Right. The coffin nail did the permanent damage there. Yeah, I mean, I totally respect your point. I think it just sort of goes back to the fact that we have not seen Topuria fight anyone remotely like Josh Emmett. Only in the most tangential kind of parallels. But,
yeah. I guess I'll be persuaded. I mean, I think the one thing about Topuria is that he is incredibly young.
Yes.
And for how complete he is as a fighter. And yeah, the level of confidence that comes with that, the level of physical and mental durability, I think probably is someone that can get knocked over by Josh Emmett and will not be like, oh no, something bad has happened. But like you said, he'll get mad at it and he'll jump back up again.
Yeah.
Emmett, on the other hand, is not young at all, as far as I can recall.
No, he's like 37, maybe?
38.
Yeah.
He just came off an absolutely brutal thrashing.
Yeah. In which, somebody just, again, very different from Topuria, but somebody insanely, recklessly aggressive who thwacked him to the body over and over again and just refused to let Emmett end exchanges on his own terms. And Emmett looked old in that fight. I mean, he just ran out of gas. The pace was just beyond his ability to control. And I think in all these fights where you can credit Emmett with hanging tough, Cater, Ige, he showed some ability to, and Burgos, he was able to control the pace of those fights. And Stevens was the one he was not. And Yair Rodriguez was the one he was not able to control the pace. There was a level of intensity and determination to create violent exchanges from both of those guys that Emmett, he doesn't have the ability to, again, it's either he gets you to respect his power and you slow the fuck down, and then it allows him to move around and reset and kind of get you to come into his range only when he wants you to, or you try to barnstorm him. And he has no choice but to hope he can knock you out. And that's why I favor Topuria. But your points are well taken. Like, it's obviously a big test. Topuria, as good as he can be technically, he can be insanely reckless, and we have seen him hit and hurt by a powerful striker before. One final thing I will say in Topuria's favor, though, is that the shot that he got caught by against Jai Herbert was a really well-timed high kick. Sort of the thing we see happen to Joaquin Buckley in every one of his fights, where he does these kind of rote pieces of head movement, jab, and then slip, anticipating the counter, and just, leaned right into a high kick. Josh Emmett, mostly a boxer. Almost entirely, in fact, a headhunting boxer. And so I have reason to think that Topuria, who, when he's on, is a pretty solid defensive fighter and is really aggressive in how he uses those defensive moves, is gonna be able to slip and then finish the exchanges on Josh Emmett. He's not gonna have
in the end, basically, I think Emmett, for this division, is an IQ test.
I agree. Yeah.
Or should be for someone like Topuria.
Yes.
And whilst he's mostly been able to thrash the noodly guys that he's been up against just out of the cage on, pure physicality, he does look like a smart fighter as well as a like three-dimensional one.
Let's say not so much a smart fighter, a well-schooled fighter.
Mm-hmm.
He's an educated fighter whose decision-making is sometimes questionable, but I just have a feeling will be questionable in the right way to make Josh Emmett uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I think you could be.
Still think he's going to get knocked down sometime in the first 3 minutes.
Probably, yeah. At some point, he's going to get hurt. That does not seem to be in doubt. I just think, Shane Burgos is a guy who's he's too smart for Josh Emmett. He's too smart to beat Josh Emmett. He's in there trying to be cute and trying to make sure he has the right answer for all of these, at the end of the day, really fundamental, simple things that Emmett is doing. Emmett just cycling between 2 or 3 punches and timing them well. And Burgos got caught up trying to have the perfect exchange. And I just think Topuria is less concerned with that. He would like to have a nice exchange. He wants to initiate with the jab, draw a shot out of you, slip, come back to the body, and then finish to the head or whatever. But he will, you hit him clean, he will just try to hit you the fuck back. I think that a certain amount of that is good against Josh Emmett. It's not what Josh Emmett wants anyway. As much as he might be successful in those exchanges regardless, that is not a kind of fight that he wants to have.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm favoring Topuria. It's very much still a coin flip because Josh Emmett is so dangerous and Topuria is somewhat unproven and, he has a style that just invites violence. He's going in there against a dangerous fighter. He's just going to walk into the wood chipper. So.
Yep.
But assuming he can recover from whatever bad thing undoubtedly happens to him, I think he's going to keep it going and win the fight. And
he just has to be able to get through a guy like this. If he wasn't fighting Josh Emmett, it would be Dan Ige or it would be Calvin Kattar.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And fortunately for him, I think of those guys, he's in there against the guy who's he's the most likely to actually be able to stop him.
Yeah, for sure. And they're both, I think, probably slower, but they are slower but smarter fighters than Josh Emmett. Yeah, he is the IQ test, especially of this particular archetype.
Yeah, and they're immortal. I mean, that can't be ignored. They are just immortal in a way that Emmett is not. Not that Emmett is has a glass chin or anything, but we're talking about Calvin Kattar and Dan Ige here.
Yep.
All right. Good matchup, very interesting, huge test for Ilia Topuria. Whether we are right or wrong, I have no doubt that this will be a very interesting fight with some, at the very least, massive moments of violence. So looking forward to that one. And on that note, let's take a break. We're probably going to have a much shorter segment too, talking about Amanda Ribas versus Macy Barber, but still an interesting, meaningful fight for that division. And then after that, it is time to recap Sergio Pettis, Patricio Pitbull for the Bellator Bantamweight title. All of that after this. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it. All right, welcome back to Heavy Hands. As promised, we are talking about a women's flyweight contender fight between Amanda Ribas and Maycee Barber. I'm still not 100% sure, by the way, that I'm pronouncing Amanda Ribas' name. Ribas. A lot of times I try to sort of straddle the line between a s sound and a sh sound and hope that I'm kind of stumbling on the right pronunciation. I don't know.
I mean, just do what I do and say to yourself, no matter how bad my pronunciations are, Zane is out there.
That is exactly what I was just thinking. I'm better than Zane.
Zane is out there to make us look better.
Yeah, I'm better than Zane. What was the name I was torturing Zane with last week? Let me look back at this UFC card just so I can revisit my glee. It was, the name Quinones. Which Zane would say Quinones or Quinones. He could not get that goddamn Enye in the right place. Quinones was just unattainable for him. Although for you, Phil, we did have a commenter a couple weeks ago who was outraged that you insist on saying Amanda Nunes.
Yeah, it's because of
it's the most common
fight. I think it was it Diego?
Yeah,
it's actually a Nunes.
That's how it's commonly done in Spanish. Yeah, and it's the same name, but the Portuguese version has no Enye, so it's Nunes.
Yeah.
But it's confusing because some of the Portuguese names do have Enyes.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of those nasal sounds in Portuguese, so I don't know why they decided, you know what, we're not going to do Nunez, we're going to do Nunes. But you're in trouble. Time out for you, Phil. But fortunately, one of the fighters here has a very normal name. I know you can say Barber.
Barber.
Or wait, I forgot. You live in England, so you might actually pronounce that surgeon. Maycee doctor is how you think of that. Pulls teeth, cuts hair, applies leeches. Anyway, on to the actual fight. Much more straightforward. I mean, it's almost like we're looking at, you called Josh Emmett an IQ test fighter before. It's almost like both of these fighters are kind of IQ tests. In fact, it's almost like everyone who isn't Valentina Shevchenko, and even her to an extent, in the women's flyweight division are IQ tests, which is why we revisited the idea, the sort of parallels between the women's divisions and men's divisions. You have to jump around a little to cover the whole spectrum of men's divisions, but women's bantamweight and featherweight are clearly men's heavyweight. They suck. It takes one phenomenal athlete to just rule over that division forever. Women's strawweight is like men's lightweight, possibly men's featherweight. Like good, a lot of quick. You got a lot of diverse skill sets. You get some crazy athletes. You get some super high output, like volume fighters. A lot of diversity in styles there, mostly striking. And then women's flyweight, I think, is pretty obviously the equivalent of men's middleweight, or possibly the worst aspects of men's welterweight.
Yeah, I think it's middleweight. It's the division of most good fighters.
Yeah, almost every fighter is just that little bit shy of being really very good, either because they, like Amanda Ribas, which is how I'm insisting on saying it, because like her, they have very broad skill sets. She's sort of like, who's a good comparison? Who's the Polish guy at men's middleweight? Yatko. She's sort of like Krzysztof Yatko.
Yeah.
Who can be just like embarrassed by a certain kind of specialist, but in their best performances do a little bit of everything and always find that little area where the opponent isn't quite as competitive as they are in the other phase. And then Maycee Barber is like, I would say not the Jared Cannonier we saw last weekend, but the one we were seeing a couple years ago. Just a hoss. And incredibly tough, very difficult to get rid of, and frequently reaches a point in the fight where she's just like, I guess I'm losing time to be strong, and frequently wins fights because of that. Third round Macy Barber is an established trend at this point. She has won a lot of fights that she was otherwise losing pretty cleanly by just getting mad and deciding not to care about doing cool moves and just grab her opponent and start smashing their face. So the two of these together, both IQ tests in different ways. Who do you think passes?
He-bash with caveats.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, and we were sort of saying this before before we started this segment, but she really is one of those fighters who seems kind of built to feast on people who just try super hard.
Yeah. She beats the strivers.
She's just got, like, a depth of skill in pretty much every area. She's good in the clinch. She's a decent wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
She's a busy striker. And, she keeps a decent pace. People who just keep coming after her have traditionally just kind of gone straight into the wood chipper.
Yep. And one of her many options will work against them.
Yeah. On the other hand, like, she's kind of a mess. It's all, like, she's a very well-constructed fighter in terms of the things you want to be doing in a fight. You want to be working your jab.
Right.
You want to be able to fight in whichever phase is necessary. And you want to be able to, keep a pace on your opponent.
Yeah, she'd be very pleasing as a student to Mark Henry.
Yeah.
You know, keeping your punch count up, just always doing something. Broad strategy, really reliable.
But she's just like a mess.
Yeah.
She's like often pushing her punches. When she isn't pushing her punches, they are pushing her, and she's flying off her feet.
Yep.
She's, there to be hit. I think it was the Rodriguez fight.
Yes.
Which I thought was a bit of a unlikely outcome at the time.
Mm-hmm.
In retrospect, I'm just like,
mm-hmm.
This is so likely to happen to you at some point.
Yeah.
Because I think, a lot of her style is just built around, I think her style would work very well if she always had the reach advantage, basically.
100%. Yeah, she just flings herself literally face first into the pocket. Her chin comes up and she leads with it all the time. And, somebody like Rodriguez, who also is a fighter who just tends to get stronger and more accurate as the fight goes on, is if it hadn't happened in that fight, it would have happened in another one. Somebody is just going to smash Hibash on the chin as she is throwing. And that is still there. I mean, it was there even in the Araujo fight, where I thought overall a super strong performance from Hibash. Even in the first round where she hit like a clean takedown and did a lot of great work from top position. Once they were back to the feet, she just, she's a pace fighter really at the end of the day, Hibash, and she just had to keep pouring out this constant output of punches. And Araujo just started hitting her with the cleanest counters you've ever seen. Every shot that hits Amanda Hibash tends to be as clean as it could possibly land. It's right across the chin because she's not expecting it and she's not in a good position to deflect or absorb it. The chin is right there.
Yeah. So I think that from like a boxing standpoint, she's probably still going to tune Barber up, albeit with probably at least one ropey moment.
Yeah.
Where she's going to get clocked. Dude, I'm interested that like Barber is slowly building a range game, which actually kind of makes sense for her, which is mostly just like slamming in kicks because she's as you said, she's just a hoss. So she's more and more she's just like slamming in kicks and then using that brief moment that the opponent is blocking them to just charge.
Yep.
Or sometimes just slamming in kicks, and again that makes sense. that will probably allow Barber a bit more ability to compete at range than like Paige Van Zandt or the nascent version of Mackenzie Dern had.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, I feel like it is just one of those ones where like Hebash is going to be beating her up so consistently that even if Barber and Hebash is just like super tough, I think, just physically, mentally kind of thing. That even if Barber manages to work her way back into the fight in that third round explosion, it's just not going to be enough.
Yeah. I didn't miss that Freudian slip, by the way. Nascent virgin of Mackenzie Dern. You wish, you fucking creep. I bet that's really important to you.
All the trouble of getting a better mic and still deliberately misunderstand my perfectly enunciated English.
You can't blame the mic here, pal. I heard that.
Enunciated, not enunciated, by the way.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you said slowly developing, because most of Macy Barber's striking game is it's ass. Like, it's ass in a very different way from Hebush's. Like, I think as you said when we were discussing this before we hit record, that Hebush is very much a good idea, bad execution fighter. Uh-huh. Mackenzie Dern is a bad idea, bad execution fighter. Still much of the time. Like, she is still very much, and it makes sense given who she is, because she's a really strong athlete. And so many of her fights, she knows, like, whether she knows it conscious or not, she has internalized at this point that she's just going to be able to overpower people. And so nothing has really taught her, certainly no coach at Team Alpha Male so far has taught her not to just be a like grab bag of random ideas. And so you'll just see like a spin kick, which is like not only a classic bad MMA fighter idea, like I'll just try a spin out of nowhere because it's different from what I did before, but not even like well done. Like a spinning back kick, but it's like entirely a twirl. Like that's not how a spinning back kick works. Go watch that old Joe Rogan video that MMA dorks love to quote. It's a linear kick, okay? You spin and you thrust. You turn and thrust. You don't just twirl around like that's a wheel kick. She just lots of random ideas that aren't even well executed. Terrible boxing at range. The kicks are more decent at range when she keeps them simple. She's obviously just a very strong kicker, although as you were saying that, you may have heard me snort. It happens to be a moment in the Barber-Lee fight, which I'm watching as we discuss this, where she fired a kick and Lee fired a high kick at the same time, and they just both nailed each other at the exact same moment.
Nice.
But because Barber is so powerful, having these tools to kind of hurt people at long range, once she finds that moment of hesitation, the opponent to just burst into range. She doesn't have the bridge to actually get there. But once she creates enough hesitation where she can just step in, she does throw much tighter mid-range and short-range punches than she used to. Nice, tight, powerful hooks. And one thing I have liked a lot in her recent fights is that she seems to understand more how important it is to get hands on her opponent. She's not a good wrestler. She's not even really a great clinch fighter, but again, she's a beast. And when she gets into the clinch with people, she doesn't have to worry about accuracy. She doesn't have to worry so much about overthrowing. She knows exactly where her target is. And again, she just seems more aware of that in recent fights. Like, oh, I'm going to actively try to close distance with my opponent, crash into them, and then start crushing them with elbows and short punches once I get there. And, yeah, I mean, I think almost certainly Hebush is going to get hurt at some point in this fight. Because Macy Barber, however much success you want to have against her, you have to be super consistent, which Hebush is in her way, but Barber's tough. She's going to be in there. And as we know, Barber gets to the third round. She realizes she has to win, and she absolutely goes for it. every single time. She goes for it super, super hard. And if that means being completely reckless, that's fine. She knows she can get away with it. And she usually can. So, I think it's the well-roundedness of Hibash here that has me picking her, because she is going to have some scary moments in the feet, but she's just a much better technical wrestler and grappler. Barber's bottom game in particular is pretty heinous at times. At one point in the Lee fight, she hammerlocked her with her legs, just weird improvised athlete stuff. But this was all surrounded by her being in side control and just being flat in her back, not trying to get an underhook, not fighting to frame, just grabbing onto things and trying to muscle her way out of every position. I don't think that in particular is going to fly against Hibash. Hibash is a pretty fundamentally sound, competent top position grappler who is also fearsome with her ground and pound. She might do actual lasting damage that prevents Barber from getting back into the fight. If she can establish a good half guard or mount and not get bench pressed off. So yeah, you were saying before, Phil, I found this interesting, that Macy Barber strikes you as a fighter who might, as she gets a little older in 2 or 3 years, move up to bantamweight and suddenly be just that little bit faster than her opponents and still be an amazingly strong, powerful athlete and just start crushing people in the next division up. And that sounds probable to me. We how many times have we seen that in the move from middleweight to light heavyweight, for example?
Yeah. And I think, she's just someone who, he's got tons of the natural attributes that you want from a fighter. She's not scared of fighting anywhere.
Absolutely not.
No, she thinks she's a good striker, which is together with the physical traits takes you a long way to actually being a good striker.
Yeah, as I said, nothing has actually effectively convinced her yet that she isn't, because her bad striking works a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so she's just going to keep trying it, and she's presumably at some point. Who knows? I mean, she is better than she used to be.
She is. She's going to keep getting more comfortable. Just the sort of quiet improvement that comes from experience that pretty much every fighter undergoes if their career goes on long enough, that she just will start to internalize which strikes work best for her, which ranges are best for her. We're already seeing that process happen. And
so at some point, I'm sure she will go up to bantamweight because she is huge, and then she will realize everyone up is that she probably won't, she'll never be any great shakes defensively, but she'll get up to bantamweight and she'll realize that almost no one there is either, and also they're all going to be 1,000,000 years old and the same people that we're looking at now.
It's going to be a 43-year-old Juliana Pena. And Juliana Pena is going to say something about Macy Barber's dad and how at least she raised her kids or something, and Macy Barber is going to vengefully tear her head off and punt it into the stands. I think that seems very plausible to me. Undeniably, Barber is tough enough to be a contender. She's insanely tough. She's unbreakable as far as we've seen so far, and she hits hard as hell, and that will take you a long way. Those are really the bare bones of what you need to be a fighter, and she has all those things in spades. She's better in all those regards than Paige Van Zandt, for example. More potent than Paige Van Zandt, with a similar degree of resilience. Okay, but we're taking Hibash for the time being. We don't think Barber's there yet. Still, both fighters a bit of an IQ test. Both fighters obvious flaws. Hibash has more than enough openings for Barber to maybe find something. With that, let's take one more break. When we come back, Sergio Pettis, Patricio Pitbull, after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back. The Bellator bantamweight title was on the line. We talked about this one last week. Patricio Pitbull, truly one of the greatest champions in MMA history, having already moved up and beaten Michael Chandler to win the division, to win the title in the division above his home at featherweight. Moved down as a very old man in MMA terms to take on Sergio Pettis, and it didn't work out. We talked about and sort of decided to set aside a lot of the concerns that usually come with weight cutting. I think largely justified, because many of the problems you normally associate with weight cutting were not apparent. I don't think he looked extra fragile. He got buzzed at one point, but it was a shot that very likely would have buzzed him at featherweight, which has happened plenty of times anyway. Nor did he gas. He looked like he was absolutely ready to do several more rounds and probably would have liked to try to make something happen. But the one other concern that we always associate with fighters moving down in weight, the differential. I don't know if do I misuse the word differential? I think I do. The speed difference.
No, I think that's fine.
Okay. That I think was the one of those factors which was apparent and impactful on the fight. That Sergio Pettis was undeniably the quicker fighter, and this is usually a paradigm on which Patricio Pitbull finds himself on the winning side. You know, being a small and impressively athletic featherweight, he is almost always the visibly faster fighter. And that was not the case. Beyond that, though, I think it would be a great disservice to Sergio Pettis to pin everything that happened in this fight just on the fact that he was faster. Because if that was his one big advantage going in, there were still some stylistic hurdles that he could have stumbled at. And instead, I think he looked incredibly well prepared, was more consistent, I think, than I have ever seen him in fulfilling the game plan he had for this fight. I came away from this really, really impressed with Sergio Pettis' performance. I thought he did great. And frankly, it gave me that feeling I love to have where I'm like, you are my son and I'm proud of you. I've watched you grow up and I'm so happy to see you succeed in this way. That's how I'm feeling about Sergio Pettis right now. Good job is what I say.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when Sergio first came to the UFC and got upset by Alex Caceres, and, you know, there was a lot of that, there was a lot of sort of schadenfreude, is like, you know, you're not just going to come in here and, you know, replicate what your brother did. Mm-hmm. You know, this guy's trying to come in here and think he's gonna, like, be another Pettis brother that's going to get his way to a championship. And, you know, the more you looked at him, the more you realized this guy is not like Anthony at all.
Yeah.
But, and, you know, mostly in the ways that he wasn't insanely tough or mind-blowingly athletic for the weight class or even, like, super coordinated.
Yeah.
But yeah, what came through is that he was just like a really hard-working, functionally well put together fighter who just kind of slowly improved over time.
You always got the sense that he was the more technical of the two because he really needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Anthony could get away with a lot more shit and afford to be a lot more sort of experimental and improvisational because he is that kind of athletic talent. Sergio is much more of just a good enough athlete who really needed to build a well-rounded kickboxing game to succeed. And there were still limitations there. I mean, we talked last week. I think there are some good things to say about this school of striking in light of this performance, by the way, but we talked about some of like the limitations of Duke Rufus's coaching style, that a great many of his fighters are notably devoid of head movement. And we suppose that this would be a problem. This is another thing which he has developed. I mean, I wouldn't say this was like a performance defined by head movement in particular, but he knew how to use what head movement he possesses and how to both when to time those slips and ducks. Nothing more complicated, say, than the kind of defense Petr Yan employs, but usually employed right in the middle of an exchange that he had initiated and usually followed up with some very nice, meaningful, technical offense. That, I would say, was the story of this fight, really, was that Sergio Pettis understood that he had to be first and last for the entire 25 minutes. That he had to use his jab, as we suspected he might and kind of hoped he would, to prevent Patricio from getting easy timing on counters. But what I did not see coming is that he was going to use his jab to initiate exchanges to draw out those counters from Patricio, to then know that counter was coming and slip it or duck it, and then finish the exchange, re-counter Patricio with 2, sometimes even 3 shots, and a variety of them. I mean, a lot of times it was like a 2-3 or a 3-2. Other times there was a jab and then like a duck, and then he would exit on a jab. Other times he would jab or feint, draw out the counter, start firing back, and Patricio would backpedal. And he did a thing I really like about Duke Roufus and other sort of American-style kickboxers, where he would sort of finish his combinations with his kicks, particularly with high kicks. Like, this is something you don't see from Dutch kickboxers or from Muay Thai fighters very often, at least not modern Muay Thai fighters, is like using a left high kick the exact same way you would use a left hook, but as a version that is adjusted for an opponent who is trying to backpedal out of boxing range. 1-2, they're sprinting backwards. You get a very, very long left hook in the form of that left high kick. There were a couple of nice instances of Sergio doing that as well. Just really shut Patricio out of the exchanges for basically 25 minutes straight.
Yeah, and this kind of goes back to, I think the ability of Sergio to initiate those exchanges and then answer the answer. I think that was what really kept me from being anywhere close to picking him, was just the idea that I didn't think he could do that. Like, right. The Font fight was, I guess the Font fight was one where his inability to be first was what was really handicapping him. But yeah, I mean, in this fight he was able to be first, and I think that's the difference between we talked about how, like, Patricio doesn't necessarily fight like a shorter fighter. Yeah. But he does, as you mentioned, he does fight like he's the faster fighter a lot. And I think back in the day, before, it must be a couple of years ago now, we were talking about this and I was like, I don't know if I like Patricio's current style. Because, Yoel Romero at the same event kind of had the same problem, is that, like, doing nothing as an aging fighter is a terrible thing to get addicted to. Yes. And
that's a bad habit.
And a small amount of how I was thinking about this fight was, like, people that Patricio has been fighting more recently have been people who have mostly just given him things to work with. Mm-hmm. The fight against God, why am I blanking on his name?
I'm blanking on everyone's names lately. It's too much MMA.
The champion, the guy who beat him.
AJ McKee.
He then avenged his fight.
AJ McKee.
Yeah, AJ McKee, of course. He's not a super, like, high output fighter, but he is a relatively committed one. Yes. Let's say. Yeah. Yeah, and once Patricio was dialed in, he was able to mess him up. And similarly, Michael Chandler was just, like, completely confident he could just blitz across space and wipe Patricio out, and then just got instantly countered and destroyed. This was very different, and did think it was concerning for Patricio. Like, the complete lack of adaptation in a fight which was obviously going extremely badly.
Yeah, but I think that right there is kind of typical of Patricio. Like, we specifically praised him last week for being a great rematch fighter. That basically all of his notable losses, except the one that was vicariously avenged, which we laughed about, by Pat Curran, he has avenged all of those losses. And I think what has happened in each of those cases is that Patricio has had these initial fights with people, not been as well prepared as he thought, and has demonstrated that he is not really a mid-fight adjuster. And really never has been. Either he comes in with the right idea, and either it's an easy win or a tough win, but he will gut it out if he needs to, but he will gut it out doing the things he came in ready to do. And then if it doesn't work, he'll come in with the rematch and have retailored his approach. And for example, against AJ McKee, the retailored approach was very Amanda Nunes-esque. He just did less. He was like, I am going to make you do the first thing every time. And I'm going to take advantage of your awkwardness and your tendency to overswing and overcommit. And I'm going to shut you out of the fight. It was a very negative performance. It made a lot of sense. I think very savvy from Patricio, as it often was for Amanda Nunes. But was just to sort of take the athleticism of AJ McKee out of the equation. And that is the other thing we talked about, that Patricio's new low output style. I think you can view this phase of Patricio's career as an adaptation to a trend that basically all fighters encounter, even the best ones, where they get less comfortable just inviting risk and pulling the trigger as they did when they were young. You know, old people realize they're mortal, and old fighters don't want to just walk into their opponent's teeth over and over again. They tend to pick and choose their shots a lot more as their careers go on. And for Patricio, I think he found a very savvy, crafty way of doing this, which is that, as we said last week, he'll be the smaller man who will force the bigger guys to take away their own reach advantage by reaching for him, by extending themselves at them and collapsing the distance, so that he can then shoot in and intercept them. Or he can be just out of range and then catch them while they're recovering from overextending. And this is, as you were concerned about when the karate era of Patricio first kind of emerged, it is a much lower output style. And, here it bit him in the ass. Because he wanted to answer what Sergio was doing, and Sergio was able to be first without overextending himself. There were a couple moments when he did, like when he got Patricio on the end of like a double or triple jab. He got him backpedaling, and then he would just swing for the fences with a right hand. A couple of those were some worrying instances from Sergio, who put himself really badly out of position. But for the most part, he was letting Patricio get right into the end of his range and just poking him. Jab. Not out of position. I haven't crashed into you. I haven't even given you something that's easy enough to time that you can like slip it or slide back out of range and assume that I'm going to be following in recklessly. He just touched him, broke his rhythm, and then more and more as the fight went on, like Patricio had to start looking for his counters, and Sergio was just ready for them. And the simplicity of his defense, like, again, very rudimentary stuff, often one slip or just ducking straight down, or just a straightforward like sidestep or pivot, usually just one move. But it worked really well because all of those defensive moves were following an initiative he created. So much easier to successfully anticipate and answer the opponent's strikes if they're striking on your terms, if they're striking because you have threatened them first. And that Sergio just like mastered that dynamic. I'm going to begin the exchange. You're going to throw because I I know you're going to throw because I've touched you, and I'm going to slip that and then pay you right back. As I said, that was really the story of the fight, and Patricio, yeah, it was just, he didn't have a reliable way of gaining initiative and therefore creating counter opportunities in the same way that Sergio was creating the counters he wanted to land.
For sure.
Yeah.
I don't know what I want from Patricio now. I mean,
I think there's every chance that if these two were to rematch, they probably won't. It was a comprehensive win for Sergio. But if they were, you'd probably see a better performance from Patricio.
Yeah, I mean, you always do.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't find myself thinking, like, he looked super physically diminished.
No.
If he'd been suddenly, weirdly knocked out by Sergio, it would have been, you would have been like, oh, that's odd.
Yeah, he got wheel kicked on the temple and did a brief stanky leg, recovered fine. He didn't get tired. He didn't look slow. He looked slow relative to Sergio's bantamweight speed, but he didn't look slower than he has.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to happen again, and I almost don't want to like take this great moment away from Sergio, but I am curious what would happen in a rematch, because I think time and again that has been a factor in Patricio's career, that he just comes in with a different approach designed to solve the specific issues he couldn't solve the first time around. Probably it would be a lot more volume of jabs, a lot more assertive with the pressure. Probably it would lean more on the wrestling, which he was successfully able to get Patricio down on a few occasions, but only very late in the rounds. Probably in a rematch, I would expect him to lean on that more. Maybe I would expect him to try to wear on Sergio's gas tank, to try to strafe him with body kicks as he's coming forward, to try to... yeah, I mean, there are a lot of little tactical adjustments Patricio could and probably would make in a rematch, but as a guy who has never been particularly adept at adjusting mid-fight, Sergio was the guy who came in with the perfect game plan, and Sergio has not always been the most consistent fighter himself. You know, and we have seen fights for Patricio where they're not going well and he just guts it out and makes something happen. That could have happened in this fight. Sergio didn't give him a chance. It was a goddamn masterclass. It was a really perfect performance from Sergio. And I really appreciated how in his post-fight interview, he talked about that. He was like, yeah, I'm a guy who second guesses myself constantly. I'm insecure. And I had to set all of that aside. And I think he should be immensely proud of this fight because he looked...
Did you also see his, like, not like the immediate post-fight one, but the one where the post-fight presser?
No, I did not.
He was like, I am surprised. I am surprised, motherfuckers. Like, I didn't think I was going to beat this guy.
That's nice.
Yeah, like, it was like charming seeing him afterwards, like doing a little bow to Patricio, and also that. With the, like, when he was fighting, like when they had the standoff with Patchy Mix, which again, like, none of this illustrates the changes in modern weight cutting better than the fact that Sergio Pettis fought someone from, I'm doing air quotes here, a weight class higher, and the guy just looked exactly the same as him. Yeah. And then he fought and then next he's fighting a career bantamweight who just fucking towers over him. And Sergio was doing the thing where he was like standing on tiptoes next to Mix and like laughing with him. Very charming.
Yeah, I really did enjoy that post-fight moment when Patricio's just started, knowing he lost. I'm sure. I'm sure it would look like an incredibly frustrating experience for him, and went through the motions of like, oh, fight's over. I'm going to raise my fist. I'm going to walk around. I'm going to act like I won. Who knows? Sometimes this maybe works. I don't know. And Sergio, like, relieved. The fight's over. He immediately grins at Patricio and looked a little like saddened that Patricio like didn't acknowledge him and just walked away. He followed him and patted him on the shoulder and was like, turn around. And then bowed very respectfully, like, I'm trying to respect you right now. And Patricio had to acknowledge it. him and his brother are two of the more likable characters in this dumbass sport. And I think that came through. It only makes it more satisfying to see him deliver such a professional, consistent performance.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Also, his defensive wrestling was not bad. There were a couple times he got surprised, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that Patricio was not able to initiate a lot of clean takedown entries because Sergio was controlling the range and was controlling when and how the exchanges were engaged. But he did show, I think, a more dogged takedown defense than I have seen from him in some of his past fights. Like, really insisted on getting his underhook as quickly as possible, even on one of the attempts that worked out because Patricio was able to lock his hands. Sergio had his underhook. He was getting that shit immediately. And then just kind of, if he had to give up his back, he had to give up his back, whatever. He squirmed out of the vast majority of those takedown attempts really impressively. Yeah, I mean, I think a new technical level as well. Again, like we saw some defense that we didn't credit Sergio with having. I think his footwork was absolutely on point. There were some really nice pivots. And then, he also, he used his broader sidestepping footwork very well. A lot of like cutting back and changing directions, making Patricio have to reset in his efforts to cut him off. And, there were also a couple times where you could see Sergio found himself cornered and realized he just had to knuckle down and just accept an exchange. Ones where he got hit and just kept punching. So I think a real blend of like professionalism and poise, but also some heart and toughness. I saw a lot of people commenting on the night. I didn't watch this live. I saw a lot of people commenting on how this was a boring fight. And I'm not going to say it was a thriller. But I feel like if you're at all invested in how fighters grow and develop, if you have any fondness for Sergio Pettis, then you should have been pleased by this because it was this was just a guy who was often doubted himself and struggled and had to gut out much tougher fights, taking on an all-time great fighter and just shutting him out. And it's not like he shut him out like Valentina Shevchenko style. He had to actively stay in control of the fight the entire time because Patricio was trying to pressure, was trying to get favorable exchanges. He had to keep the jab in his face. He had to keep having the last word in all of these exchanges. He had to stay defensively responsible for 25 minutes straight. That's what you call a perfect fight. So, bravo, I say to Sergio.
Right, like it was, even when, like, Kyoji lost to Sergio, it was one of those fights where I was like, I didn't really feel like he should have won this one. It was a bit of a weird, KO, all that kind of stuff. But it was also one of those ones where it was just like, man, you are one of the guys that never gets this kind of moment. I'm very pleased that you could get it.
Yeah.
And, like, similarly, I'm just really happy that, he now gets to follow up that kind of Bisping Rockhold kind of moment with just an actual genuine, like, clean, undeniable win over an all-time great.
Yeah. He looked phenomenal. All right. Well, I think that's really all we have to say about it. Just once again, plaudits and bravos and applause to Sergio Pettis for the best performance of his career against the best guy he's ever fought. And yeah, full credit to Sergio for that. And I can't wait to see what kind of approach he comes in with, and hopefully a new well-deserved boost of confidence against Patchy Mix. That's a very enticing fight as well. Good stuff happening over there in Bellator. I'll tease once again that we are going to do a little bonus stuff for the Patreon. We're probably going to talk a little bit about that Bellator main event, Vadim Nemkov, and whether or not he is the best light heavyweight in the world. Another sensational performance from him. We are also going to talk, I think, about the Dan Ige, Nate Landwehr fight that we did not get to touch on from 2 weeks ago. I just wanted to talk about that one a bit. We're also going to talk about Jared Cannonier, Marvin Vettori, and Arman Sarukian versus Joaquim Silva, 2 fights that turned out way, way better and more entertaining than they really had any right to be, and in varying ways, super impressive for both of their winners. So a lot of stuff to talk about on a bonus episode. Make sure you check out patreon.com/heavyhands. I should also note that I have in the tank a James Toney boxing commentary that I recorded that is basically just waiting to be synced up to the video. That will be coming to the Patreon certainly before the end of the month as well. We were a little slow on the Patreon last month, so this is how it goes with me. I'm an inconsistent bastard, but I try to make good when I've been behind in uploading stuff. So I hope you guys will be pleased with the glut of bonus stuff coming out in June. Otherwise, find me and Phil on Twitter at @EvilGregJackson. That's Phil at BoxingBush. That's me. And next week we will be back. Is it the UFC pay-per-view that we actually have to look forward? The good one?
Is it?
No, it's the Strickland, some guy named Magomedov.
Oh no!
God damn it.
But it is Spence Crawford.
Okay. Oh, right. Okay. We have a very, very good boxing match then. Maybe we can, he was on pretty recently, maybe we can wrangle Kyle back in. And if not, maybe we'll get Ryan Wagner or somebody else versed in the striking arts to join us for that. That makes me feel a lot better. And then fortunately, following that, the second event of UFC event of July is UFC 290, which has Volkanovski Rodriguez. It has Moreno Pantoja 3, I think. It has Whitaker Duplessis. It has Turner Hooker. It's got a lot of good stuff. So thankfully,
that's where they put the good fights.
Yeah,
all in that one card.
Yeah, except then you get to the prelims and you're like, who? I thought you were saving them all for this card, but even that is not quite top to bottom. We won't complain about it, though. It's a great card, lots of good stuff. The pain will end, okay? The wait will be over soon enough. Please join us for all the suffering and all the joy in the weeks to come. And if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.